Thank you, Lord Mayor. As I rise to propose this amendment in the name of myself and Councillor Mariam Khan, I have an amendment to make to the amendment itself. Lord Mayor, I'd like to delete paragraph 1 and replace with to after paragraph 1 insert. It's an agreement between the Liberal Democrats and ourselves where we'll hopefully agree to this particular amendment. So we're not deleting paragraph 1 as was originally suggested in the amendment, with your permission, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by asking ourselves, why are we having this very important discussion in the premier debating chamber outside Westminster and at the home of the largest local authority in Europe? Councillor Zaffar and Councillor John Hunt have both referred to the fact that we have a large Kashmiri diaspora community residing here in Birmingham. In fact, Lord Mayor, we have the largest Kashmiri diaspora community in the world. Birmingham is home to more Kashmiris than anywhere else outside Kashmir itself. I think it's of huge importance, in particular to second, third, fourth generation British Kashmiris like myself, that whilst we look forward to life here in Birmingham, we are more or less integrated as best possible within our great city. It's important to understand and realise our roots, and our roots when we look back to our roots, this outstanding issue of Kashmir is prominent to us. But I must also add, Lord Mayor, there are many people who are not necessarily of Kashmiri descent or Kashmiri origin who are passionate and care about this particular issue here. There's people across this chamber, and the last time this particular debate was brought to this chamber, it was actually my first meeting as an elected councillor. It was a Conservative group that brought this particular motion. So it's not just people of Kashmiri origin who care passionately about this, but people of all walks of life who are peace-loving Brummies care about this particular issue. Lord Mayor, the recent rise of violence in Indian-administered Kashmir has largely appeared since the 8th of July, when a pro-independence activist was brutally murdered by Indian armed forces. And since then, it's been absolute mayhem within Indian-administered Kashmir. We've seen hundreds suffer as a result of pellet gun wounds. We've seen many also die. And Lord Mayor, there's women that live within Indian-administered Kashmir who I regard as half-widows. People will ask, what are half-widows? Half-widows are those individuals, those wives who do not know whether their husbands have been martyred or whether they are in custody of the Indian armed forces or the Indian government. And the reality is they have been living in these conditions for years upon years. And I think it's imperative that this council calls upon our government, in particular when we're building relations, further trade relations with the Indian government, to ensure that representation is being made to the Indian government that these human rights violations have to stop, and have to stop immediately. And we also have an important role as a country in ensuring that to happen, because this Kashmir dispute is outstanding business of the British Empire in South Asia. Lord Mountbatten in 1947 failed to convince India and Pakistan at that particular time to seek a peaceful resolution of Kashmir. And it is a duty upon our country to play a role which is far more forward-looking than it's been historically. I think it's important that Theresa May's government makes immediate intervention, as well as the European Union makes immediate intervention to the Indians. Lord Mayor, I'm conscious about time, and one of the key things I want to touch upon is the right of self-determination. And some people will say, what is that? I'm not here advocating for the Indians and the Indian government, nor am I here advocating for the Pakistani community or the Pakistani government. I am here with this amendment advocating on behalf of Kashmiris who have the right to determine where their future lies. Not the Pakistanis, not the Indians, but the Kashmiris themselves. And this was a right that they were first promised in 1948, the UN resolution. There have been 18 further resolutions in the United Nations that has promised this. Prime Minister Nehru promised it in 1948. No one has delivered upon it. It is important, again, our government makes representation to the United Nations, to the Pakistani government, to the Indian government, insisting that the right of self-determination is given to the Kashmiris. And I also want to say, Lord Mayor, not begging on behalf of the Kashmiris. The same way that this country granted the people of Scotland the right to decide on their future, whether it lies within the Union or not, in the same way that David Cameron, the then Prime Minister, gave the people of the United Kingdom the right to decide whether this country should remain part of the European Union or not, that is the same right that the Kashmiri people have. And that is the only way we are going to get to a peaceful resolution. There is no other way. The only way we're going to get to a resolution is through the democratic right to vote that is given to the people of Kashmir. We've seen things like soft borders. And that's worked at times, but that's not resulted in a soft borders are when Kashmiris either side of the border can meet and greet and each other, because there are families who are divided. In fact, the Prime Minister of the Azad state in Jammu and Kashmir, Farooq Haider, he's a Prime Minister, yet his maternal family lies on the other side of Kashmir, and he can't meet with them, he can't communicate with them. So the Prime Minister of a country cannot engage with members of his family, and I think it's important that we look at giving that right to those individuals. I think it's also important that our government makes representation to the Indian government to allow independent observers, independent media, whether that's parliamentary delegations, whether that's local government delegations, whether that's the United Nations delegations. But most importantly, the Indian government allows charities into Kashmir to support those that are most vulnerable. There's people like Insha, Lord Mayor Insha Malik, a 14-year-old who had a dream of being a doctor, is lying in hospital right now, suffering from a deadly illness that's affected her brain because she was shot with pellets, 100 pellets, while she sat in her house in a remote village. She's blinded. There's Junaid, I read a 12-year-old who wanted to go to bring his sister home from supplementary education, from tuition classes. On the way back, murdered on his doorstep. A 12-year-old boy. How many more Junaids and Inshas will it take for the international community to stand up and make that difference that's needed? We need to stand up. And as I repeat, I'm not advocating on behalf of any government. I'm advocating on behalf of the people of Kashmir. Very quickly, the Armed Forces Act 1990 in Jammu and Kashmir, some regard it as black law. In fact, I've read articles where Indian journalists themselves have said it's a black law. We have to have the demilitarization within Kashmir. That was promised in 1948 in that original UN motion. And Lord Mayor, as I conclude, I'd also advocate for simultaneous demilitarization of both the Pakistani and Indian armed forces out of Kashmir itself. Lord Mayor, I propose this amendment. Thank you.